If you were to go on Google right now and you Googled what is sex addiction, over 187 million bits of information show up. Can you imagine that? So many millions of bits of information on Google to answer the simple question of what is sex addiction. Millions and millions of Americans struggle with sex addiction, over 1 billion people around the world, and I share that in most of my videos because it really is a disease where sex addicts feel so alone. Like you're the only sex addict in the world that's struggling with what you're struggling with, and there seems to be not a lot of talk about sex addiction. There's a lot of fear talking about sex addiction. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of embarrassment to talk about sex addiction. Well, I'll be the first one to tell you I am a recovering sex addict. I am not afraid to admit that I am recovering from sex addiction. I am not ashamed of the fact that I had this disease for decades, and my disease of sex addiction completely destroyed my entire life. I had a spiritual mentor for many, many, many years who watched my demise and kept on guiding me to gain a life of sexual sobriety, but I was not willing to do what it took. There are so many sex addicts that want to get sober. There are so many sex addicts that need to get sober, but there are very few sex addicts who are willing to do what it takes to get sober. And you must be willing to do what it takes to gain sexual sobriety. Today, what I'm going to talk with you about are 3 strategies you must do and places in life you must be for you to transform your life from one that is sex addicted to a life of sexual sobriety. My story is certainly one that has transformed from an addiction to sex that my spiritual advisor says is the worst case of sex addiction he's ever witnessed, to a life of sobriety, sexual sobriety, and of course sobriety from alcohol and drugs as well. My drugs and alcohol, especially methamphetamine, played a significant role in amplifying my sex addiction. So because I was getting drunk and high on crystal meth for years, that amplified my sex addiction where I was less inhibited and certainly became very extreme in my sexually addictive behaviors. So you can transform your life and break free from a life that is sex addicted and hopeless to a life that is beautiful, a life where you are free and available and present and can succeed in relationships and in your personal life and in your professional life. It's possible for you. Today, I want to talk about 3 strategies to help you gain sexual sobriety. So let's take a look at the 3 now, then we're going to break them down one by one. Strategy number 1, you must be done negotiating with your sex addiction. Strategy number 2, you must take suggestions from someone who was where you're at, who has what you want. You take those suggestions so you can get what he has. And strategy number 3, you must be patient with your newfound sobriety, as sex addiction recovery is a process recovery. You must be done with your sex addiction. You have to be to the point where you're willing to do what it takes to gain sexual sobriety. The best way to learn how, the best way to take in the knowledge you need, and then apply that knowledge, because that's the secret, applying the knowledge, putting it to action. The best way to do this is you find someone that has what you want, who's been where you are. That person is going to get you right where you need to be. You must be patient with yourself and have compassion for yourself as you traverse the new path to sobriety. Have compassion for the journey. My experience, my strength, and my hope for you, through the first few steps, these strategies are going to take you where they took me, from a life of active sex addiction to a life of freedom and sexual sobriety. So the first strategy, you must be done negotiating with your sex addiction. There are 3 outcomes for you when you're done. 1 is enough pain. Have you had enough pain? Now let me tell you, if you haven't had enough pain, you're not ready to stop your active sex addiction and gain sexual sobriety. Because decisions will be made based on pain. You may have the illusion that gaining control of your life and experiencing sexual sobriety is more painful than continuing to act in your sexually addictive behaviors and keep that sex addiction alive and strong. We base decisions on pain. That's our human nature. And to you, if it looks more painful to stop than it is to continue, you might not be ready to stop. You have to experience enough pain that you're willing to do whatever it takes to change and transform your life. So the question I have for you right now, have you had enough pain? Have you truly had enough agony in your life that you're willing to do whatever it takes? Because I know you want to stop your sex addiction, and I certainly know you need to stop your sex addiction if you want to live a fulfilled life, but you're willing to do what it takes. And you're only willing to do what it takes if you've had enough pain. Have you bankrupted your life? Has your life become bankrupt financially, bankrupt of relationships, bankrupt of peace and serenity, bankrupt of your family? Have you given everything away for your sex addiction? Do you feel emotionally, physically, spiritually bankrupt, empty? Because if you've had enough pain and you have experienced bankruptcy in your life, you might be to the point where you are willing to do what it takes. But there's a third ingredient as well. Have you been arrested and experienced jail or prison time because of your sex addiction? I had to get arrested. I had to have handcuffs put around my wrist. I had to be sent to jail. I had to go to trial, and I had to go behind bars for 5 years. I met a young man, an 18-year-old on Craigslist, who lied about his age. All we had was cyber sex. I was cyber sex addicted. That was one of my addictions. And he wound up being a high school teen under 18. I did 5 years, and I'm a registered sex offender because of that. This is where my sex addiction brought me. So I had to have enough pain. I had to bankrupt my entire life. I lost my 16-year career. I lost my reputation in the community. I lost my freedom. So I was completely bankrupt. And I got arrested, went to jail, and did prison time. I experienced all three. And I don't want you to have to experience all three of those ingredients for you to gain sexual sobriety. I had to. And I really hope you take my story to heart of where sex addiction can take you. Have you had enough pain? Are you bankrupt enough? Have you been arrested? These ingredients all play a role. And when you have to take a look in the mirror and you have to say, I'm done. The question is, are you done? Strategy number 2. So you find someone who has what you want, who was where you're at. You do what he does, you'll get what he has. This is called having a mentor. You need a mentor. I had a spiritual advisor who was alcoholic, drug addicted, and sex addicted. Got sober in his 20s. He's now in his 60s. And this man completely changed and transformed my life. And I needed 3 ingredients to make that happen. It was great having a mentor. And the fact that he was where I was at when he started guiding and giving me different techniques and skills and strategies that I had to learn and apply to change my life, that was great. I had to take on that mentor, but I still needed to do 2 more things to make that mentorship work. One of the things I had to do was I had to shine an honest light on my sex addiction. Sex addiction lives in darkness. I had to shine bright lights on my sex addiction and share it with my mentor. Share all my secrets, all the sex acts I was ashamed of and embarrassed of, any of the guilt and self-loathing. I had to share that with my mentor. I needed to shine light because darkness cannot exist in light. You have to take suggestions no matter what from that mentor. You have to take suggestions no matter what. My best thinking through the progressive nature of sex addiction brought me to handcuffs. So now I needed to take suggestions from Tony, do everything he told me to do no matter what, because my way wasn't working. Is your way working? Is the best thinking that you have available to you right now working for you? Is your best thinking leading you to a life of prosperity? Or is your best thinking taking you down the road of the progressive nature of sex addiction? Or quite simply, are you in denial? Do you not see the elephant in the living room? Are you in denial that this sex addiction is tearing your life apart? And if you are, you're not ready. Active sex addiction is the disease of denial. It's an addiction that doesn't allow you to see it for what it is. And you'll deny it, you'll stand up for it, you'll defend it, and that would mean you're not ready. Strategy number 3, you must be patient with your newfound sobriety, as sex addiction recovery is a process recovery. It's a process recovery because it's so deeply rooted. When you first start recovery from sex addiction, you'll start to take a look at all the sexually addictive behaviors you're aware of. The behaviors that once you start them, you're unable to stop until exhaustion, or you have to stop, or you have to go back to work, or whatever the case is. You're going to act out in those addictive sexual behaviors and be unable to stop. You may be in a relationship and not addicted to sex with your partner, but you may have a sex addiction to pornography or sex clubs or prostitutes or anonymous sex. So you take a look at the sexual behaviors you're addicted to. That's one of the things you'll do as you gain knowledge and understanding of your sex addiction. But it's a process recovery, because what you'll also learn in time are behaviors you're addicted to that you aren't even aware of. For an example, do you shake hands with certain people to see if there's a flirtation between you two, to see if there's an availability? Do you shake hands with someone to feel the vibration, if this is somebody you might have a chance with? Do you do flirtatious eye contact around the room? If you're with your boyfriend, do you have eye contact with other guys in a flirting nature? Or do you look at guys who are flirting for you? Do you rub against guys on the dance floor? And that's a way of keeping you sexually addicted. You'll come to learn certain behaviors. Do you dress a certain way? That's provocative. Are you flirtatious in conversations? Do you have conversations that are sexually charged? Do you have fantasies when you meet certain people? So you have your sexually addictive behaviors, but then you have these other behaviors you might not be aware of. So as you progress in sexual sobriety and you're recovering, you'll become aware of the behaviors you're not even aware of right now. Have compassion for yourself when you experience setbacks. Now, if you have a setback, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are back in your addiction. A setback is like a slip. It's like falling on ice. Get back up. Stick to the basics. When you first got sober, what were some of the things you had to do? You may need to refresh yourself. Hit that reset button. Use some of those strategies you used a long time ago when you first got sober because you had a setback. Be aware of what stimulated the setback. Understand what brought you to a setback. And most of the time, it's going to come down to what you're thinking about. These 3 strategies I had used while I was progressing towards sexual sobriety and finally leaving a life, a horrific life, where I was sex addicted. These 3 strategies and all the little ingredients I talked about in there were what I used. And these worked for me. They started the process for me to gain sexual sobriety, and they will work for you too. If you want to watch more videos on gaining sexual sobriety, please subscribe to my channel. I post a new video every Tuesday. My mission is to help you break the spell of sex addiction and gain a life of sexual sobriety, because what I want for you is you to be a thriving, healthy individual. So subscribe to my channel, hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell as well so you get notified every time I post a video. Also, go to my website. I have a free 10-step strategy session. It's about 30 minutes long. It's going to give you much more information on how to gain sexual sobriety. I'll have the link below for that 10-step strategy session, as well as going on my website and downloading my free ebook, 5 Phases of Recovery from Sex Addiction. That link is below as well. So I highly recommend you take advantage of all my resources, because once again, if I can get sober from sexual addictive behaviors, you can too. I guarantee it. You just have to be willing to do what it takes. I look forward to seeing you again real soon, so stick around. You have a blessed day.